As you may recall, we've outlined 7 major problems with audio believability that are part of either the recording chain or the playback chain. A link is in the description for details. One of these items is the problem of recording standards. Today, we look at a new electronics product from Vandersteen that's designed to address this issue. Let's see what Richard and team have done. Most of this video will be excerpts from an interview that I did with Richard Vandersteen recently. But I want to provide 2 pieces of context for our discussion because context matters a lot to understanding. First, for those of you not familiar with Vandersteen Audio, they're a California company started in the late 1970s. Their original innovations were embodied in the Model 2 loudspeaker, the best-selling high-end speaker of all time. Richard Vandersteen made extensive use of live versus recorded tests to experiment with different design concepts. He found that eliminating the baffle to the degree possible, along with time aligning the drivers electrically and acoustically, made a big difference. I bought a pair of Model 2s in 1979 and can testify that it was a great and affordable design. Vandersteen has gone on to do other speakers and amplification products, but these always seem to have a signature element of out-of-the-box thinking deep inside. The other bit of context we need is to cover the nature of recording standards and the problem this creates for playback systems. The punchline is, the best available research, plus long-standing production constraints, shows that the spectral balance of commercial recordings has shifted since 1960. Short version, today's mainstream releases are noticeably bass heavier, with a tilt upwards in the bass region and a bit flatter shape of the overall tilt, less strictly mid-centric, showing some uplift in the 1.5 to 4 kilohertz presence region. Basically, recording engineers have gone from an N-shaped curve, where bass is rolled off and treble is rolled off and mid-range is emphasized, to a ski slope-shaped curve, where bass is increasingly elevated as frequencies go below 100 hertz. After the bass ski slope, there's a bump in the slope in the upper mid-range. Standards for this have changed decade by decade, which is to say, the bass roll-off of the 1960s was reduced in the 1970s and reduced to roughly flat in the 1980s. This is partly or primarily because of better playback technology. First, better cartridges that were able to track bass cuts, and then CDs, which could produce bass at whatever level the producer wanted. In the 1990s and 2000s, bass-heavy music like rap and hip-hop influenced standards more broadly, so now bass was elevated further relative to the mid-range. After work was done to limit the loudness wars in the 1990s and 2000s, thankfully, although we're not done with that, engineers shifted to generating impact and detail and now spaciousness as a means of differentiation. Classical and jazz have not exactly gone through this evolution, although styles and standards do cross genres. But in jazz and classical, close microphone positioning has increased to generate detail, with the necessary result that treble frequency balance is different from what you would experience in a concert hall or club. Our main points for this discussion are: frequency balance of recorded music has changed significantly over time. It is probably not possible to play recordings from many different eras and get correct frequency balance on your stereo without some adjustment. Recordings vary from one another depending on the artistic sensibilities and skills of the engineer. It is not obvious that every recording is right, and since they vary, it is logically hard to understand how one stereo system can work for everything. At the Absolute Sound, we've argued that tighter mixing and mastering standards and equipment would be beneficial, But inevitably, there are philosophical and practical limits to that approach, which leaves us with adjustments we can make on the playback side. When reviewer Alan Taffel alerted us to a new product from Vandersteen that addresses these issues, we naturally wanted to know more. Here's what we learned. Anyway, let's start here, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You have a new preamp. Can you tell us about it? And particularly, can you walk us through the EQ features, which I think are a real point of difference with this product?
Okay, it's the L5 Audio Control Center, and it's 12 dB, fully balanced preamp with all end channels. And it has a smoke and mirrors section. And in that smoke and mirrors section, we have EQ, we have matrix, we have different percentages of mono blend. And then there are 3 presets. So any combination of those that you choose can be stored in one of 3 presets, so that when you find a combination that works on, let's say, early rock and roll, you can make a preset for that. And I have found in using it that this covers a lot of the bases, keeps you from having to fiddle to think, because with it on everything. Because, you know, after it's mostly about the music. It's all about the music, and you get back to it soon that way. It's implemented in a way that is parallel and not in the audio path. So this guarantees that no extra switches or any provision are used to disable it. The extra switches, relays in our case, are used to implement this. So you can guarantee that if this smoke and mirror section were not in the preamp, it would not have been any better at all in any way. And that's important.
Or to say it differently, when what you're calling the smoke and mirrors section is defeated, it's truly completely out of the circuit.
It is absolutely out of the circuit, and with no extra switch contacts in the remaining circuit to do it, to accomplish that.
Okay. So you're being very literal about it's not there.
It's not there, right? And that's, I think, important in our community because the reason they went away 50 years ago is when they went away, the preamp ended up sounding better because of the way they were implemented in the day. They were still in the signal path, even if they were in the neutral position. And then some people came out with a defeat switch, but it was an extra set of multiple set of contacts in order to defeat it, which in essence wouldn't really need to be there if the tone controls weren't there. So the end result was they took it all away, and we ended up losing what I think is an important thing to have if you enjoy a broad amount, music of all kinds for its musical value.
Let's start there then with the EQ part of it, and I want to get to the mono blend and the matrix bit. But if we start with EQ, because I think that's maybe a large area of possible contention, what made you think that EQ could be beneficial?
Well, early recordings, when we had LPs only as a source, a lot of the early recordings, the amount of bass that was on the master tape did not get put onto the LPs, because it would have resulted, for many people with low quality turntables, it would have resulted as a defective record because the cartridge or tone arm couldn't track it. So the result was they mixed the bass mono and they cut the amount of bass that they put on the records. I find almost all of the older recordings.
And then what time period are you talking about?
I'm talking about 60s, 70s, 80s.
Okay.
Almost all of them just sound better to me, or more like a reissue. This is also kind of what's going on with some of the reissues. They sound better to me with a little bit of bass boost. You can also use the bass boost to replace what used to be the loudness contour for listening late at night at lower levels, boosting the bass a little bit because our ears are not as sensitive at lower levels to bass as they are at normal listening levels. And the way that it's done is a curve that is not typical, where it engages a little sooner. It's very shallow. It's not a 6 dB per octave slope. It's a 3 dB per octave slope, and it's a peaking filter. So I've found with experimentation over the years developing this a curve that just seems to a lot of the old type of tone controls, if you added bass because you wanted bass, it also made the recording sound muddy. And we found a way to do it without getting the mud.
Okay. And is the level of the bass boost adjustable at all?
It's three different, they're fixed positions in order to do it as sonically purely as possible. So you have +3, +6, +9.
Okay.
On the treble, you have +2, +4, -2.
Okay.
-4.
So for those of us who are fans of the idea, I count myself there, you can set it up with the bass boost and treble cut, let me call it, as kind of a tilt function.
Yes. In fact, when you do that, you end up with something very similar to what Quad had back in the day as a tilt function. The other thing you can do too, which is popular, is you can do the smiley face thing where you can boost the bass, boost the treble a little bit, but what we're really looking for is the mid-range saddle. Because there's no independent mid-range control. It's a way of getting a saddle in the mid-range, which works on a lot of recordings that were designed to pop on the radio. They just ended up being very, very mid-rangey, and that's a way of getting that saddle. And it's just a more pleasant experience. None of this makes the recording state of the art. The whole idea is to take this music we love that maybe wasn't recorded perfectly or as well as some are, and make it more enjoyable and make it a better experience.
In that light, then, talk to me about the mono blend idea.
Well, that comes from the early recordings were very ping-pongy. You had information in the left speaker, information in the right, and there wouldn't be a lot of center fill or whatever, and it was very right, left. And using a little bit of center fill, in ours, we have about 25% blend, 50% blend, and 75% blend, and then full mono. So there's three different increments. You use a little bit of that, and it tends to pull the instruments out of the speaker and put them a little bit into the center stage. And it gives you a more natural effect of that. You know, it could have, like it would have been had it been produced in your sound room. It's just a more natural thing. The other neat thing about it is we have a matrix thing, which is an ambience very similar to the BSG qual, which retrieves phase information and manipulates it right, left, and injects it. And it is a fixed value, but by using the mono blend, you can even adjust the amount of that you get. Obviously, if you put mono, there's less stereo information, so less for the qual process.
What's the audible effect of the matrix system? What would I hear?
That
generally?
It's basically you would hear an openness, more ambience. It's an ambience retrieval system. Different variations of this have been done for years. Phase Linear had something. The latest, most recent adaptation of this was by BSG. The late Larry Kay did the BSG qual thing that was engineered by a man named Barry. And they sold some of those boxes demonstrated at the shows. Most of the magazines did reviews of that box. However, we didn't take it quite to that point because, again, we don't have it's a parallel circuit where we don't have all of our signal going through it, but it's informed by that. It's similar to that.
Got it. Got it. And just in terms of usability, you've got these multiple settings. So you have uh, 3 settings for well, really 4 if you include flat, 4 settings for the bass, 0, +3, +6, and +9. You've got, uh,
Minus 3.
oh, and -3 in the bass?
Yes.
Okay. And then you've got a set of settings, 4 or 5 settings for the treble, and then you've got 3 or 4 settings for the mono blend, and then you've got the matrix. So there are a lot of combinations here. Do I have to go over to the control center to invoke this stuff, or can I do it on the remote? Can I have a preset 1 button?
Yeah, no, none of this is available on the preamp itself. All of it is only usable on the remote.
Okay.
And yes, there are 3 presets where if you find that you want 1 degree of mono blend and you want some bass boost and you want some treble cut and you want to use the matrix ambience retrieval, which is a very popular way to play a lot of old recordings, you can hold one of the preset 1 down for 5 seconds and then the screen will say saved, and that combination will be there anytime you hit that button. And there are 3 of those presets: 1, 2, and 3.
So if I were, this actually sort of is me, if I liked pre-1965 jazz, which had some very weird spatial things going on and strange balance, but I like the music is unbelievable, I could have a button that I dialed in my settings for those kind of records. And then if I liked late 70s rock and roll, which I also do, I could have a different setting for that where, maybe there's a little bit more treble roll off because some of those recordings are kind of hot, but whatever.
Yes. Exactly. Cool. And what I've found in playing with this over the 7 years this has been in development, what you end up liking in those various genres is very similar. This is why I decided to put the presets in there, because once you find out a combination that works for you as an individual in your system, however it's configured, it's surprising how many recordings enjoy that same selection of smoke and mirrors.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very interesting. Now, I want to deviate slightly from this, but I think it's actually relevant to the conversation. My impression is that you've also worked on with speakers and amplifiers dedicated to the bass section, ways of tuning speakers to the room environment. Is that in your head? Is that a completely different thing from what we're doing here?
Yeah, that has more to do with the inevitable problems you have when you take a full range speaker and put it in a room, a sealed room. You are going to have various bass problems. Everybody does. And in all of our speakers where we could afford to do it, we do powered bass sections where we have 11 band equalizer that's involved in the bass channel only, so that it doesn't involve any processing for your mid-range and high-end information that goes straight through your system. This is in the speaker itself, and that's tuned to your room, and that's done with a test disc, and there's a variable Q control and level controls. And that is a room solution. This can also be done with DSP, and many people are doing that. But then you suffer the consequence of all that digital manipulation of the entire signal in order to make the bass corrections.
So the EQ that you're doing in your speakers in the bass module is analog EQ?
It's all analog, yes, because you can't do it digitally, because digital has a latency where you can never align it with an analog signal that went through. So there's always going to be that timing issue. So you either have to do it digitally to all frequencies to make the correction and accept its compromises, or do it in analog so that it can be done in real time and blend with the rest of your hi-fi from 150 hertz on up. And we have that, all of our speakers. I wish that all of our speakers had that feature, because every room has bass problems. But of course, there's a cost to it. So we start with that provision in our subwoofer, which is $3,000 for one. And we start with our Quattro, which is around $20,000 retail. To do it lower than that gets, then you're talking about Class D amplifiers, and they do have latency, so it's very difficult to realign that with a straight through analog system. Yeah, because that would allow someone to take a recording like Diana Krall or whatever that is very well recorded. There are no qualms. You use a recording like that to dial in your system to your room, because there's really no corrections needed. And there's a lot of those recordings in our industry that are so well recorded. And you then adjust the speaker to make a great recording sound great in your room, deals with the standing waves and bass corrections that are needed to help the room become more linear. And then the stuff that's in the preamp, that's on a recording like that, you would have that. The biggest button on the remote for audiophiles that might get nervous or their knees might start knocking, the biggest button on the remote is called direct, and it takes everything out. It guarantees you're back to the to what we have today in all preamps, straight through. No games, no smoke and mirrors.
So in a way, there are 4 presets: direct, and then the 3 EQ presets, right?
Yeah, or any combination of the, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The whole idea, though, was to not give small adjustments. Make these adjustments large enough to where you can make an instant analysis. Yeah, that's good. No, that's not. And get back to listening to the music as fast as possible.
Is that why the presets are settings rather than a bunch of adjustments, like parametric EQ?
Well, there's 2 reasons for that. In order to do them as sonically pure as possible, we didn't want to use potentiometers, so they're fixed resistors and fixed capacitors. But I would have also chosen to do as few as possible, because when I use the cello palette in my own system, I've had some means of changing all of my wife and I listen to a lot of music that's not well recorded, but we love the music. And the problem with the palette was it was so complex that by the time you got it to where you thought you liked it, the music was over. And it became a project unto itself. I didn't want this piece to be that. And found these, quote, rough cuts that make many recordings more pleasant, a better experience to listen to, without having to really make that your project for the evening.
Yeah, which becomes a distraction then.
Yes, exactly. I was trying to keep it on the music, focus on the music.
Thank you, Richard.
All right. All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
I hope you've enjoyed this preview of the Vandersteen L5 Audio Control Center. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again soon.